Okay, this book is called Winning Converts. It's written by a Catholic priest about converting people to Catholicism. And I figured I'd just blow through it real fast, And, the author means well, but he's talking about a lot of situations that aren't that relevant. Like, for example, he'll talk about a Protestant walks up to you and asks you a question about the difference between Catholicism and Protestantism. And what I've seen is nowadays, most people, it's not a question of Protestantism versus Catholicism. It's a question of atheism versus Christianity. And most people, they're really very low in their functioning. They're functional illiterates. They've had a public school education. They haven't read a single book since they were a freshman in high school. They have reading levels about, junior high level. And so it's kind of hard to go into any type of sophisticated apologetics or ethics or anything with them. But there's a few things I think you can say, even to somebody who's really not functioning at that high of a level. And the first one is, it all goes back to Genesis, Genesis 1:27, man's created in the image of God. If you're created in the image of God, then humans are part divine as well as part beast. But at least you're entitled to natural rights. You're not like other animals. You deserve respect, privacy, the right to own property, the right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You're something special. You're not just an animal. If you go down the path of atheism, which the public schools are basically atheism schools, they teach that humans are just talking monkeys with a common descendant from chimpanzees, which I think is incorrect. I'm an expert on the subject of evolution. It's bogus. It only explains microevolution, the variety within a given species, like a dog or something. It doesn't explain different types of species. Our brain's 3 times the size of a chimp. We have different chromosome number. We have a whole bunch of differences, okay? We have orphan genes, all the regulatory DNA, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm basically saying is, if you say that atheism is okay, and you accept the public school premise and the biology premise in college and grad school, if you say that it's okay to say that humans are just talking monkeys, then what you're saying is that humans have no rights, that there are no morals, there's no right or wrong. If there is no God, then there is no meaning. Like Gottfried Leibniz has said, there's either God or nothingness, yes or no. And if you say that there is no God, then what you're saying is everything comes down to power. It's dog eat dog. And whoever's got the power, they can do whatever they want. And it's been like this before in history. During the Roman Empire, for example, the emperor, if he wants to sleep with your daughter, he doesn't even need to ask your permission. He can just send a couple of his guards, Praetorian guards over there. They'll just bump off the whole family, take the woman. It's called a pearl hunt. And then, throw her in his bed that night. And that's it. Okay, that's how it is. And this is true from the Old Testament of the Bible. The different characters would try to hide the women in their family because otherwise, whatever country they were traveling through, the rulers of those countries would grab them and throw them in their bed. Okay, that's just how it works. Okay, and I always laugh at some of these liberal women that go to visit some of these third world countries, and then they think that they're going to meet these civilized people because they've heard all this multiculturalism nonsense, and then they just beat them up and throw them in their bed. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, unless you have this Bible-based worldview that humans are created in the image of God, then people have no rights, and women are physically weak, so it's very easy to just do whatever you want to them if everything's based on physical force. Okay, and in the modern world, on a large scale, money is power. Okay, so what you're basically saying, if there is no God, and this is why the billionaires want this, because they've got the most money, so that means that they could do whatever they want. Why not just take stupid proles, take some of the tissue from their body and type them and see if they match, and then let's say you have a friend who needs a kidney transplant, just go get 1,000 proles, type their tissue, whichever one has the right tissue to give a kidney to your friend, then just force them to donate the kidney. Why not? If they're just like, basically the human becomes like a farm animal owned by the secular ruler or the secular, billionaire. And, the farmer doesn't ask permission to send one cow for veal, another cow for slaughter, another cow for dairy. It's just a business, okay? And that's what the proles become, just a business livestock item once you get rid of Christianity. Christianity is the friend of the little guy. Atheism leads to communism, which means total centralization of power, and it means zero rights of any kind for the pro. Okay, so what I'm basically saying is, if you don't have God, you've got nothing. And the average person thinks that they don't understand that. I mean, to me, that's like saying 1 + 1 = 2. It's so obvious, and historically, that's been proven many times over. Okay, as far as Protestantism, I think it's weak because it puts too much emphasis on the afterlife. Nobody really knows exactly what happens in the afterlife. I say that based on having read thousands of pages of Bible commentary, comparative religious studies of the different subtypes of Christianity and stuff. So no one's ever going to agree on that. And, the thing that everybody can agree on, all the Christian different versions of it, is the message of Christ. That which you do to the least of my brethren, you do unto me. Love thy neighbor, forgive each other, help each other. Okay? That's what works to create a good society, life on earth. And I like the other things about the Catholic Church better. I like the saints. I like the saints' days, the feast days, the Virgin Mary, honoring the mother, the traditional family, the pilgrimages. All that stuff I think is great. I went to Catholic school, so I know the difference, and public school, so I know the difference between them. Catholic school is 1,000 times better. Catholic schools do stink in education, just like the public schools stink in education, but they're much better at everything else. The sense of community, the behavior, and all that kind of stuff, and the religious education that comes with it. Right now, like I said, the Protestant church is kind of very weak because they still have the same old message, do as I say or you'll burn in hell. Nobody wants to hear that, okay? And the Catholic church is weak because they don't allow priests to marry, so they get all these low IQ, homosexual, pedophiles, alcoholics, and the current pope is an antichrist who hates Christianity and wants to destroy the Catholic Church. Okay, but if you look back at the history of the religion, it's pretty obvious. The Catholic Church was founded by Christ, and his disciples were the followers of Christ, beginning in 30 A.D. When Christ died, you could say 33 A.D. Okay, and it goes all the way back to the life of Christ, founded by God, versus Protestantism didn't start till Martin Luther, 1517, over 1,500 years later. And Luther says, sola scriptura, sola fide, sola gratia, only faith, only scripture, and soli Biblia. Go by the Bible. But the Bible was written by Catholics, and it was consolidated by Catholics, and it wasn't even in place until around 400 A.D., which is, about 370 years after the Catholic Church was started. So the Bible's Johnny-come-lately compared to the Catholic Church. The Bible was written by, Catholics like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Peter, and Paul, etc. Okay, Protestantism keeps splintering into different sects, thousands of them now, and they're all founded by men. And look at what a joke many of them are, like Henry VIII, founder of the Anglican Church. He just wanted to, get a new woman in his bed, and he bumped off about half of his wives. He looted all the monasteries, destroyed, thousands of years of history of England, and also all these books from these monasteries were destroyed and wasted. Henry VIII was a barbarian. Okay, nowadays the 503 exemption rule prevents churches from saying anything interesting, and so they're a bunch of wimps, and the sermons are boring, and almost no one goes except women with little kids. Let's see what else. What I'm getting at is, I think that the idea of Genesis, how what man is, that he's created in the image of God, therefore part divine. That's the most important thing. And, Christ did say, go ye into the world and preach the gospel to everybody, Matthew 16:15. Pascal's wager is good. I also like the cultural aesthetic component of Christianity. It's just beautiful. 99.9% of good art, it all comes from Christianity. And 99% of good music, all the classical composers, all the great ones were Catholic, or were Christian, not necessarily Catholic. Bach is a Lutheran. Chateaubriand, in about 1802, wrote his book about the genius of Christianity, and what he's basically saying there is almost everything good you can think of in France comes from Christianity. That's a fact. When you start looking at it closely, and I have done so, you will see that almost everything does come from that. And so if you want to have a happy life on earth, I'm talking about life on earth, not anything at all about the afterlife. Christianity is what makes it possible. Gets people to be nice to each other so you can all coexist and live your lives. It dominates everything from a cultural aesthetic point of view. Painting, sculpture, cathedrals, universities, literature, music, etc. So anyways, and I saw all these Catholics, like my mom and my aunts, and they were like the nicest people in the world. All these women constantly laughing and joking and being nice to each other and other people. The best person I ever saw in my whole life in the whole world was my mother. And she was devout as it gets Catholic. So anyways, I think the aesthetic component is relevant. I think the survival component is highly relevant. The beauty and the enjoyment of life here on earth, all of those things are enough to make it clear that Catholicism is thousands of times better than anything else. And I don't think all this old Bible stuff and apologetics, most people, they never ever get that far. You know, if you want to read, I've read all the apologetics. They're good. They're amazingly good. The best book is Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. But the simple fact that if we don't return to a Bible-based worldview of the definition of a human, it's inevitable there's going to be a return to slavery. Of course there will be. Because the secular rulers, they don't ever want religion because religion puts something above them. It gives them moral obligations that they don't want. They want atheism because then they become equivalent of gods on earth and can do whatever they want. And once they get that, they're just going to bump off anybody who they think is annoying. Unfortunately, the geniuses all tend to get bumped off, which would include me, so I'm not very happy about that. Like I said, what I see right now in the world is the atheists are very intensely promoting atheism because they want to promote communism. You know, you look at a Muslim, Muslims are very assertive about promoting Islam, but Christianity, which is the best religion by far, they're lazy and passive, feminized and weak, and that's why it's going down the tubes. I hope there's some type of religious revival, because if there's not a religious revival, it's obvious that slavery's coming back. None of these things are coincidence. You think all these forest fires in Canada and Europe are a coincidence? No, it's because people used to survive by going into the woods, but that option's going to be gone, okay? And then when all the problems start to come, people in a city, you know, they're trapped. They can't go anywhere. They're stuck, okay? And it's only going to get worse. And if you factionalize all the populations, you know, diversity is our strength. The opposite is true. Melting pot was our strength. And make everybody not get along. There's going to be endless bickering, and then brute force is going to come in and impose all kinds of draconian rules. It's obvious that slavery is going to come back. It's inevitable. So I hope it doesn't go down that path. That's what this is all about. So anyways, hope you found that helpful.